And welcome to the second of our sessions. We are on day 5 of the VID21 conference. My name is Julia Steele, the creator and host, and we are joined in this session by the incredible Gabrielle Dolan, queen of storytelling and best-selling author. I'm sure everyone has come across Gabrielle Dolan at some point, especially if you're in Australia, but she is a global expert on business storytelling and real communications. Her clients include Visa, Amazon, EY, Accenture, and no other than the Obama Foundation. I mean, that's a name drop of all name drops. She's the best-selling author of 6 books, including her latest, Magnetic Stories, How to Connect with Customers, Engage Employees, and Brand Storytelling. She's also the founder of Jargon Free Fridays, so don't say pivot unless you're talking about basketball and netball today. And in 2020, her dedication to the industry was recognized when she was awarded Communicator of the Year by the International Association of Business Communicators Asia Pacific. And Raul, I use your books all the time. I've got your first bestseller, Stories for Work. I've used that. I give that to my clients, but we're here to talk about this one. This is number 2 in the business chart as of yesterday. We're going to get it to number 1, I think. So we're going to have a chat about this and then take people's questions. So if you've got any questions for Raul, feel free to pop them in the chat. But welcome, Raul. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Julia. Always good to be part of these conferences.
So tell me about this. I know we've talked about brands a few times, and particularly how some brands are better than others at telling their stories. But what was the reason for this?
Look, it's every time I write a book, I sort of go, there's no more else to say around storytelling, and that was certainly the way I felt with my last book. But what I did start to notice over probably the last couple of years now was that this concept of storytelling itself was getting very popular, but the concept of brand storytelling. So I'd see companies saying we're doing brand storytelling, and what I'd noticed is that they weren't doing it well, or they were just using one story and saying, oh, this is our founder's story, so we're doing brand storytelling, or calling something a story when it wasn't a story, like a timeline of your company is not a story. So that was one catalyst. But the real catalyst was I would come across, small businesses, large businesses, entrepreneurs, and I would hear their backstory, and I'd be going, why don't people know that? Why isn't that on your website? Why aren't you leading every conversation with that? And I got a lot of, well, no one would be interested. It's not really relevant. And I'd be going, it is. So I just saw these amazing missed opportunities for companies, regardless of the size, from, little small 1-person startups to multinationals, this missed opportunity of not sharing their stories, either because they didn't know how, or they haven't realized how powerful they can actually be. So, so about February last year, I decided to write the book. I thought it was perfect timing because I had 2 trips to America coming up. I had a trip to London. I had several trips to Perth. I do a lot of good writing on planes, and I thought it was a perfect time to write. And clearly that didn't happen. But, a Melbourne lockdown helped, that's for sure.
I've certainly worked for a few companies where you go to their about page and it's like, we were founded in 1901, and, our founding fathers who all happened to be, white men at the time. And, it's like la da 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 da. And it's just like, I don't care. That's not what I look for anymore.
Yeah. and worse, Julia, is when they change, and this is what they change the about us to our story, and then you go in and it's still not a story. So I don't mind the about us and there's a timeline, that's fine. But when you say it's our story and you have got a timeline, that's not a story. Not a story.
Not a story. So, I mean, that's one common mistake, and I think I've seen that a few times as well. But what are some of the other common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, look, some of the common mistakes I see when it comes to companies going brand storytelling is thinking they're sharing a story and they're not. Just thinking it's one story. I think that's the common thing. It was like, we've got one story that describes our brand. It was like, no, not one story does that. It's like so many different types of stories describe your brand. I see some companies do a really slick corporate video that is beautiful, but it's not brand storytelling. And again, it could be one story, but it's not normally that. So I also, when I was researching the book, I went out to a lot of my communication professionals asking for examples. And I got, all these examples going, oh, this company's doing stories really well. And they'd send me videos, and there would be beautifully shot videos around the company's values, for example, but there was still no stories. There were just people talking about the values, but none of them were sharing stories. So I think that's just the common mistake. It's just I think it stems from like not knowing what a story is and not knowing what a brand storytelling is.
Yeah. I am a member of an association that went through a major rebrand last year, and it was quite interesting seeing their brand, or trying to tell the story of their brand, but what they actually told was the story of their brand, not their story. So they said, oh, here's our new brand, and this is what it means, and these symbols represent these things. And like, I could see what they were trying to do, but it was actually quite factual, right? There was no connection in that at all. And it was such a missed opportunity for them actually to weave some of, as you say, their stories in it, as opposed to, we've chosen this color because it symbolizes energy. And I was like, well, I'm more interested in why you're interested in energy.
Why, exactly. And I think that's when I guess the typical approach to brand is it's our logo, it's our tagline, it's our color palette, which is all part of the brand. I get that's all part of the brand, but brand to me, if you look up a definition of brand, one of my favorites comes from Jeff Bezos, for CEO, Amazon CEO, where he talked, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. I've sort of extended on that, and I reckon your brand is the stories people share about you when you're not in the room. So it's like, how do you then take control of those stories, which is my concept of brand storytelling. So how you're actively putting those stories out there, and how you're doing things that create stories, that generate stories. You get people talking about the good stuff you're doing.
Yeah. I think particularly over the last year, I'm going to go off script for a minute, but the amount of business communication over the last 12 months has gone through the roof for very obvious reasons. And some of that communication and some of the stories of what organizations are doing and what they represent has been really well received. And then there's others that have, gotten the wrong side of communicating, or what they've communicated doesn't represent their brand either. So it's, as you say, it's the stories that you tell, and you're more likely to tell a story about, a company that pissed you off as well. So that as you say, not thinking about what you want people to say about you can have quite negative consequences on your business as well, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the first step of brand storytelling is define your brand. Like, what is it you want to be? And then what you're talking about there, it's making sure your actions, are congruent with that, because when they're not, people will be talking about that as well. And the things you can do can create some pretty serious brand damage.
So apart from the damage side, we've seen that play out in many ways. What's the powerful side of brand storytelling? What difference does it make for the organizations and the people in them when they get it right?
Yeah, look, I might answer that question with an example of, I guess, a really powerful, what I would call magnetic brand story, and why you would do this. When I was growing up, I was a bit of a tomboy. BMX bikes, skateboards, football, cricket. That's all I was doing, and I wasn't really into dolls, and therefore I never had a Barbie. And so, in the last few decades, where the Barbie brand has been a bit tarnished, because there's all these stories, she's a bad role model for girls, the body shaming, it's, that doll figure, no one's ever going to be like that. I happily bought into that until I was actually researching for the book, and I came across the backstory to Barbie and how it came about, which is Ruth Handler was the wife of one of the co-founders of Mattel that makes Barbie. And she noticed that when her two children were playing with their respective dolls, so she had a boy and a girl, Barbara and Ken, and yes, Ken and Barbie are named after her children. So for all of those you who used to pretend they were making out, they're sort of brothers and sisters, just saying, that's your weird stuff. Anyway, what she noticed is when both of them played with their respective dolls, they pretended to be adults. And Barbara could only imagine herself as a caregiver, where Ken had dolls that he imagined himself as an astronaut or, a scientist or a firefighter. And so she pitched this idea to the execs at Mattel to produce a plastic adult-sized doll with fabric clothing, and they weren't interested at all, but she persisted. And in 1959, Barbie launched at the New York Toy Fair. And as they say, the rest is history. But there's a quote from Ruth Handler that says, "My whole philosophy of Barbie was that through the doll, the little girl could be anything she wanted to be. And Barbie always represented the fact that a woman has choices." And as soon as I heard that backstory of Barbie, it completely changed my opinion of the brand. And not only changed my opinion, but will actually influence my future buying decisions. So I've got two daughters who are 17 and 20 now. I never bought them a Barbie, but any future grandkids may just get a Barbie. So, but when I see that, when I talk about the missed opportunities of brand storytelling, that story is on their website, but I had to search really hard to find it. And I think the only reason I was researching it for the book, and I had to find really hard to find it. I'm thinking, why isn't that story front and center on their website? Why isn't that story on every single Barbie package? Because that message about a girl imagining herself anything she want to be and a woman have choices is still very valid, as we very clearly know, still valid today. So to me, that's a missed opportunity, but it also shows the power of what a really good brand story can do. It's like you can have instant attraction.
That story's really changed my perception as well. I mean, Riley, my stepdaughter, is 10. We were walking through the shopping centre quite recently, and there was a big Barbie display, and she just looked at me and said, "Jules, why do people still buy Barbie?" And I'm just like, well, for 10 years old, I'm just going to high five you for that question. But once we got beyond the high five, it was, that was my perception as well. It was, quite dated, not necessarily in tune with, what we want to stand for as women. But as soon as you tell that story, it's a different conversation altogether. So what sort of stories do you see? I mean, there's five types of stories in the book. What are the different ways people can tell stories about their brand?
Yeah, look, so that, to me, so I might talk you through the 5 types of stories and then give you another example about how the result can be. One of the first stories I talk about in your brand stories is your creation story. Now, this is typically like your founder's story, so how the company started. But I actually decided to call it creation because it's not only how the company was created, but it's also how a product was created. So that Barbie story is the creation story of Barbie, not the company Mattel. So it's a creation story. So that's one type of story. I think they can be sort of one of the really powerfuls because they talk about why we did something. And they're probably the most common. The other type of story is the culture story. And this is stories you're sharing about your company's values. So, how leaders are sharing personal stories about what the values mean to them internally, but also how you're sharing stories of your employees, living the values and how you're living the values. The other one is community stories. So sharing stories about what you're doing in the community, but you sort of want to move beyond your corporate responsibility. It could be about your employees just doing really cool things in the community. And so like make them the hero, make your employees the hero. The other one is customer stories. So again, it's sharing stories about your customers, but again, I think it's going beyond, our customer used this product and this is what they got. So going beyond testimonials, but again, how could you make the customer the hero of the story? I got to speak to so many clients or customers and companies around the world. And one of them was Columbia Restaurant, which is the oldest restaurant in Florida in America. And they're a 5th generation family owned company. And one of the things they do, they're so into storytelling, but an example of a customer story is on this year on Valentine's Day, they put something on their Facebook page about a couple who had been celebrating their wedding anniversary at Columbia Restaurant. I think it was like for 55 years. And they came to Columbia Restaurant on their first wedding anniversary, and they came back on their second wedding anniversary and coincidentally got sat at the same table. So now Columbia reserved that same table for them the date of their wedding anniversary for the last 55 years. So when you think about that, that's a cool story about a customer, but sort of the subtle message is it must be it's a great company, isn't it? A great restaurant that would do that. And so those customer stories have to be subtle. And the final story is a challenge story. So again, how you've responded, how your company's responded to a challenge, how individuals have responded to a challenge. And so they're the 5 sort of, creation stories, culture stories, community stories, customer stories, and challenge stories. And I do like a good palette, and they're all C's. I could have easily thrown in COVID stories there, but because we got a lot of them, but I put them into challenge. So Julie, if you want, I'll give you another example, because I'm also saying you don't have to get too hung up on, is this a culture story or is this a creation story or whatever. It's like those 5 help you think of the variety of stories. So one great example I feature in the book, and the potential outcomes of this comes from Archie Rose, which are a gin distillery in Sydney, and they're a relatively new company. They only were born like 5 or 6 years ago. And when they went into lockdown in March last year, they have a bar, and they knew they were really concerned that their 15 employees would lose their job because they had to close everything. So that, combined with the shortage of hand sanitizers, they immediately made the decision to swap their production of spirits to hand sanitizer. And when I say immediately, within 3 days of making that decision, they had produced 7,500 bottles of hand sanitizer and went on to produce over 100,000. Not only secured the jobs of their 15 employees, but they're actually able to employ another 15 people from the region that had lost their job. That story went out, and they made it, they did actively share it as well. When I spoke to the head of marketing from Archie Rose, she said they had like global coverage of that story. It doubled their database from 50,000 to 100,000 in a couple of months. Their social media had increased like 30%. And she believes that their brand awareness for a really small company through that one story accelerated their brand awareness 12 to 18 months to where they thought they would be. Now, in her words, she said, we didn't do it to create the story. They did it because they were living their values, and the story, but they shared the story. And so you could easily go, that's a challenge story, it's a community story, it's a culture story. Or if they keep making hand sanitizers, it's a creation story. It's a creation story about how the product came about. So don't have to get too hung up on what type of story.
Yeah, the important thing to me when I hear those five different types of stories is that they're all in the positive, right? And so often stories get told about companies for the negative, right? And they're actually, these positive stories are a way of building brand loyalty, as you said. And whether it's brand loyalty in your customers or your employees, it's what people hang around for. So what sort of increases in brand loyalty do you see from stories like that? I mean, you use Archie Rose as a good example of that.
Yeah, Archie Rose. And it's funny, it's interesting, Julie, you said that it's positive stories, and I think the vast majority of them are positive. One of the other companies I feature in the book it's an investment company in Vietnam, Mekong Capital, and I've actually been working with them for a couple of years. Because I think this is a great example. The CEO of the company, like they're an investment company, so they need people investing in them. The CEO of a company, since he realized the power of stories, what he shares is a story of their biggest stuff up, like their biggest mistake they ever made. And he's realized that when he shares that story to potential investors, and he did go initially, I thought, they're going to think we're idiots and stupid, and why would they invest in it? But he shares about, this was our biggest mistake we made. But he talks about, this is what we learned. This is what I learned as a CEO. This is what we learned. This is what we now do as a result. And he said that one story alone, which you'd sort of say is a negative story, gets more brand loyalty than any of the other stories, because it's showing a bit of vulnerability and it's showing lessons learned. So they don't all have to be positive. It could be, it could be acknowledging negative stuff that's happened, but then what you're going to do about it.
One of the brands that I came across recently that really stood out for me is so Riley, who's 10. She's getting to the age where she's got spots on her face, and you go, well, where do you get face care products for someone that's 10, right? You can get the teenage neck of the woods, but when you're a tween, there's nothing really out there. And I came across this company called Love Your Skin, and it's actually founded by a young girl when she was 12. She's now later in her teens, but it's become this whole skincare range that's specifically for tweens. But when you read this, it's a creation story where she came from. So she had this idea because she herself couldn't find something. She went to create a set of products that she now sells. She's been on Shark Tank and got investors and whole thing. So you go, well, not only do I want to point Riley at the products because they're cool, I'm actually quite happy for her to go and look at the website, because the person that's created this is someone that I think Riley should go, well, look what you can do when you're 12, right? You can go and create this whole story. And they do a really nice job on their website of getting other tween girls to share and love your skin. And it's, they've done a really nice job of sort of loving yourself and loving each other. And it's really, really positive messaging for really positive reinforcement through their brand of things that I think are good, rather than it just being, we make face wash.
Yes, exactly. Hey, Sue's asked a good question that I might answer. So Sue said she's interested in how you take the customer like testimonial and turn it to the, look what we did and what the customer's doing. So I think I think you can still have customer testimonials, but what I would focus on if I was asking a customer for a testimonial is like not only the value they got out of it, but also how was it like working for you? So it's almost like, well, what's your brand? What are your values? So if you want to be known for, really easy to deal with or integrity, I'd be asking for stuff on that. It was like, they were really easy to deal with, really high integrity, really trust, really had us at the heart, front and center, talking more about the values of the company as opposed to the benefits of the product or service.
Do you find it quite hard when you go shopping to look at things and go, yeah, that's...
Oh my God, my daughters get so embarrassed. I was in Kiki K the other day and there was a thing that said our story. And so I'm so not a story, but I just said to Alex is 20. I go, Alex, do you reckon that's a story? And she goes, well, the fact that you're pointing it out, probably not. It was like too obvious. But I do, because I look at packages and I find things all the time that says like our story. These are a couple of props I use for my storytelling workshop, but I'll read one out, right? I'll give you an example. This is Reese, the clothes store. And I do love their clothes, but they've got, this is our story. I just need my glasses for this. Okay. Reese is a world-class modern British heritage brand positioned between the high street and luxury markets. From one store in London in 1971 to over 130 stores all over the globe today, Reese has established a design-led philosophy centered on creating directional, menswear, womenswear, and accessories. It has become an authority on true style for both men and women. I mean, that is just bullshit. But they've called it, this is our story. It's not a story. It's just a
resume.
Well, and what is directional? What is directional menswear and womenswear? My God. So I do. I read packaging all the time, and sometimes you get good ones, and sometimes you get absolute jargon laden crap that says nothing.
What was in the box?
What was in the box? Oh, so the box is actually an example of a good one. So this is toothpaste. This is toothpaste. It's for sensitive teeth. I'll give you this one. So this is actually a good one. Jessica Arman, a mother of 4, an avid entrepreneur, developed My Magic Mud to help with her child's sensitive teeth. What started off as a simple home remedy quickly turned into a successful family business and a platform to inspire others in the community to make magic. Now, that's good. See, it's sort of relatable, personal. This is blah, blah. Design-led philosophy centered on creating directional mental. I just think that's one of the most hilarious lines I've ever read. It like, let's just get jargon. Let's get some jargon. But you'll see on websites our story, and it will be we bring together best practice and cutting edge solutions to deliver to our customers. I still don't know what you do. I still don't know what you do except talk crap. That's all I can see you do.
We have got plenty of time for questions. Sharon's got one here. Do you find marketing and brand managers have a degree of fear around moving from promoting a product feature and benefit to storytelling, or is this mindset changing, or has it changed?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Sharon. In fact, one of the reasons I started to map out the book is I was applying to speak at the Cannes Lions Festival, and so it's around marketing. And the brief was it had to be new material, and they really encouraged people to be controversial. And so my controversial thing was going to be brand storytelling is not the domain of marketing. And if we think it's marketing, they just focus on products and taglines and things. Brand storytelling should be every single employee's responsibility. So I think when it comes to marketing people, I think this concept of brand storytelling, and everyone should be part of it. I think the ones that are evolving get it, but I think there's still a lot that go, no, that's we'll control the brand narrative. My God, brand narrative. And maybe it's a protection thing. I don't know, but I think they're getting there, but slowly.
Yeah. And Daniel Kennedy's asked, does your brand story always need to include your why?
I think when you look at your creation story, it should be a why. So, that Barbie example is a why. Even if you look at the Archie Rose story of creating, it's why they did it. So I think your creation stories should include a why, like why the company started. Some of the challenge community customers don't need to do a why. They just need to emphasize your values. And so I think the creation story should include the why. It's because it is literally why did the company start? Why did the product, or service get developed?
And you've mentioned Jargon a few times, and you are the founder of Jargon Free Fridays, and it is Friday.
It is Friday.
So should we hit up some Jargon for some fun? I mean, it's
yeah.
moment. What's your top 3 jargons that you just think should be tossed out for Friday?
Yeah, well, I'd be interested if people put this in chat too. Pivot. I swear to God, if I hear the word pivot one more time, I'm going to vomit. And I get maybe technically it's not jargon, but people are pivoting like there's no tomorrow. It's making my head dizzy. And you know what? Sometimes it's just the overuse. It's just the overuse of it. And I worked in corporate all my life, and you just go through stages. I remember like this is probably about 20 years ago, robust was like robust and sustainable. It was like every second person said it every second time. You could put in a meeting 20 times. And exactly, if you pivot too much, you just end up where you started, so we've got to stop pivoting. I did I did one of my ambassadors for Jargon Free Friday. Like, she's a pretty straight talker. And she was talking about, I was running some training for them, and I said, everyone will be doing it virtually, but will some people be in the office? And she said, some people will be in the office, but they'll be still doing it at their desk, because we believe in connection equity. And I went, is that jargon? And she went, no, it's not jargon. And she's gone, it's not jargon. I go, it sounds like jargon. And then it's funny, I would tell that story to a few other people, and I'm sure this is how Jargon starts. They would go, oh, connection equity sounds like really cool, doesn't it? Like you sound really, and so then people go, oh, no, we believe in connection equity. And then all of a sudden that becomes jargon and everyone's saying it. And then you go, that's how it starts.
The ones here, Sharon's going, we're on a journey.
Oh, we're on a journey
for a while.
Yeah. I must admit, I don't like journey, but it's amazing how sometimes it pops out of your mouth. It was like, oh my God, I just said journey. Bloody hell.
And Mel said, we're living in unprecedented times.
Oh, unprecedented
times. If anyone says unprecedented to me again, I think I have to say, when Donna McGeorge did her session on Wednesday, we were having a laugh that I might have to insert a bleep into the recordings every time a jargon was mentioned.
It's not only jargon, it's this reducing everything to acronyms. Like we feel compelled just because it's 3 words, it doesn't need to become an acronym. And I was watching a presentation like a few months ago, and they were talking about when people come back to work. And I'm gonna type these acronyms in chat, right? So you know what I'm talking about. They had flexibility for all was one of the acronyms. So we gave flexibility for all. Then they went, or we can have flexibility for some. And I just stopped and I go, well, when I see FFS, I just think, for sake. It was like, and you went, oh my God, I didn't realize. And the other thing was, why did you reduce it to an acronym? Like, we don't need to reduce it to an acronym. Application support specialist. Yeah.
Don Price, who I interviewed on day one, he said someone said that what was the jargon? Digital dust, that the world is surrounded by digital dust. And it's all of this stuff that gets created and left in virtual meetings. And it's like digital dust. Like we were laughing about it. It's like, where in the world did that phrase come from? And what on earth were they thinking? It's like, I'm going to go.
Yeah. And I must admit, sometimes you go, well, that's sort of funny, but but the danger is people start saying it and then go, I don't know. I actually don't know what that means. That's yeah.
Eva says, or Eva, sorry, I'll get your pronunciation right. I used to have a dictionary of corporate bullshit, bought it because of my boss. We would bet on which catchphrase from The Apprentice he would be quoting after each session.
Yeah. You love the whole corporate bingo, the it's the acronyms. I often in my training sometimes talk about, because they mean different things in different industries. Like SME could be subject matter expert or small to medium enterprise. And if you ask someone what STIs they currently have, and you're thinking it's short-term incentives and they're thinking it's sexually transmitted infection, then you got HR knocking on your door.
It's a bit of a personal conversation for the workplace.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is out in stores now.
It is out in stores now, and it's unlike my other books that I know were predominantly written for leaders people leaders in companies and organizations. This is really for anyone that wants to take control of the brand and therefore the stories people are talking about them. So it could be used as an individual, you as an individual, but it's sort of designed then as companies, whether it's just a small little startup to an entrepreneur, to a thought leader, to a big multinational. It's helping you think about what stories you could share, how to do it. The other thing, the cool bit, like a lot of people have said, it just reads like a book itself. And I think there's so many great stories in there that they're just interesting to read, whether, you're doing it or not. So I actually loved, I got, a book like this is about 50,000 words, and I often get into about 15,000, and then I go, okay, well, I'm out of things to say. It's just so and it's just the amount of people I got to, like, the oldest restaurant in Florida, the Mekong capital in Vietnam, Fullerton hotels in Singapore. I have them featured really heavily. They're doing amazing stuff with storytelling. A bakehouse in Melbourne, Australia, doing some really cool stuff. It's just like, I think the book's designed to, if you want to implement it, how to do it, but also heaps of stories that will inspire you to go, oh, I never thought of doing that. So yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks, Sue. Sue said she's loved my 7-day challenge.
Yeah. I've been through this, and I'm saying this more from a, having led a lot of projects over the years, and we always talk about, your project has a brand and your reputation in the organization and the story of, and I'm looking at through this, I'm going, there's some stuff in here that I would have been really useful in leading projects, because it's how do you get customers and employees to connect, with what it is that you're doing, as you say, regardless of whether you're the Fullerton or a solopreneur, you've got a story to tell.
Yeah. One of the things I talk about, like everyone's got a brand. Every single person, every company has got a brand. And that will evolve either deliberately, like by you taking control of it, or it will evolve organically.
Yep.
And the organic piece can be in line, or it cannot be. And so the first thing is you need to be aware of that. And when it happens organically and it's in line with your brand, well, that's good. You can sort of amplify that. But if it starts to happen organically and you go, oh, hang on a minute, that's not my brand, you just got to shut that down. But there, strategically. So, and just because you're being deliberate and strategic doesn't mean it's not authentic. You still got to be authentic, but being aware of it is the main thing. And then figuring out, how do I amplify and demonstrate it through what I do and the stories I share.
Well, I know, given that I follow you on social media, that you've done a lot of workshops and storytelling workshops in person and virtually. So as people come out of lockdown, whether you're in Melbourne or around the world, Gabrielle gets booked up quickly. So if you're interested in doing storytelling of any variety, whether it's brand or otherwise, please check out her website. She's wonderful. And every book I've got, Raoul, I enjoy reading. I particularly love that I got a magnet for this book. So that magnet's going on my whiteboard in my office, and it's a great reminder to have magnetic brands.
Can I tell you a quick story about naming the book? So I was thinking of, there was all these different names, and I was thinking of magnetic stories, but I hadn't sold it. And I was speaking to my husband. I go, I need a name of a book that will show that once you hear this story, you have this instant connection to it. That's then really hard to pull away from. It's like you stick to it. And he goes, I've got it. I've got the perfect name for your book. I go, what? He goes, Teflon Stories. And I went, that is the complete opposite of what I want to achieve. He's not a cook, my husband. He went, oh yeah, that's right. That's not good.
That's a beautiful story. If you are driving through Melbourne and Sydney, I know that you will see 50-foot versions of Gabrielle, because she's got giant notice boards up. So every time you see one, when you're out and about, smile and wave at the real notice. Well, smile and wave at the real Gabrielle online now. But you're a machine when it comes to writing books and storytelling. And just when you think there's nothing more to say, you come out with a cracking book like this. So